Hello guys, and welcome to a new episode of Perrisburg. In today's episode we are going to be building a office district next to the downtown, which functions as the transition between the downtown and the low-rise areas like the suburbs, warehouse districts, etc. This build will take up most of the area between the central station, the highway, and the train tracks that are running next to the downtown. And as you can see, I already selected the core buildings for this area, so I don't have to scroll through, find it all the time, and I know what I want to fit in this area. So as I already said in the intro, this area is functioning as the transition between the downtown and the suburbs, and more importantly is that it makes the skyline look good from behind. That's why you sometimes see me moving a building in the skyline or placing a building there just to make it look complete. Over here you see me covering the blank white wall on the side of the key bank building before moving on to placing a few buildings next to the central station. This block of buildings will mainly be focused on hotels that are built here because it's close to the central station, and I guess people would want to stay here if they can't stay in the more expensive hotels on the waterfront. You could see this as a little open space separated from the scary downtown, so that makes it more interesting for tourists to book this hotel and not somewhere in the middle of the downtown. This might be a bit confusing because I'm already building the next part while still talking about a block that came earlier, but I had to fit a lot of stuff, a lot of building in one video, so I might talk over another part of building sometime. So we're placing a warehouse between all these offices, and this is a building from before the modernization, when this was a pretty industrialized downtown and there was a lot going on next to the train tracks because that was the easiest way to get goods in and out, a part of the harbor of course. It also gives this sign that the downtown is not perfect yet and that there's still some leftovers from a previous age, and for the rest it looks good in having a transition between high and low rise. We're adding a small deserted plot of gravel with some bushes on it, which gives the sign that this place is going more and more to suburbs as well. Okay, we had some overgrown place in the downtown, but that was more some deserted corner that nobody bought yet. And this is an actual garden, you could call it. you see me constructing a little underpass under the highway because I wanted a bit more integration with the other part of the downtown. And I feel like in a downtown like this, you always have these roads that not everyone knows and still connect places with each other. So at this point, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with the space under the highway, and we end up detailing it in this episode. But yeah, as I said, I just didn't know what to do. I didn't feel like placing shops underneath it because there barely is any low buildings in this part of the downtown, so it just wouldn't fit with the rest of it. And on the other hand, I didn't want to place down a wall and make a kind of dike out of this because I want to, as I said, have a bit more integration with the two sides of the highway. So over here we are just adding a little parking lot before going back to the original area for this episode and placing some more buildings over there. As I mentioned earlier in this episode, I wanted to use a lot more trees in this area, so over here you see me placing a lot of trees in the backyard of these buildings. Most of these are Pidelmo trees and yeah, they just look great in my opinion. And then we move on with the train tracks, because I really wanted to integrate the train tracks with the area over here. And I decided that a little bit of height difference also would look cool. So I'm just using a quai over here to mask this height difference, which was quite annoying to do because the slopes weren't the same for the quai and the train tracks, but at the end it kind of worked. Because I wasn't really sure what to do with the rest of the train tracks, I moved on to building a little truck parking over here in the corner in the middle of some buildings. I could imagine this as a place that companies could rent a parking spot on for their truck to stand there until they get picked up and brought to another spot. Most importantly, because if you have some valuables in the truck, you don't want the truck to be standing in the open. And that's why we put a fence around it as well. So back to the train tracks. As this is an important rail line, I decided to put a fence between the tracks and the office district next to it because, you know, we don't want people to jump in front of the train. So I just extended the fence that we placed next to the tracks near the central station, and then I just used surface painter to connect the two train tracks with each other with some gravel. We're moving on with filling in the area between the offices and the warehouse and the train tracks with some bushes and trees. This to at least have some separation between the train tracks and the buildings, and again to create more realistic transition. We're just finishing this area off with some trees and with building a small park before going to creating a lot of parking lots next to the highway. So now we will mainly be focusing on placing a lot of parkings. And this first parking lot is for the hotels that we placed next to the central station. This is just a little parking in the back of these buildings so that the guests don't need to park on the parking of the central station. It was a little bit tricky to make the access road for this parking, but at the end it worked out, and we'll also be using this access road for a way bigger parking, non-private parking under the highway. So we are moving on to the parkings under the highway. As I said, these are public, gigantic parkings that were created when there still was a lack of parking, and yeah, it's pretty efficient to build these parkings below the highway because this space wouldn't be used anyways. Okay, maybe there would be some small shops, but especially with the highway exit being over here, there would pretty much nobody be wanting to build a shop there. So I'm just going to place a few more of these parkings and do some other detailing under the highway, and I'll just leave you guys to a little time lapse. So as the last thing for this episode, somebody suggested me in the comments that I should use more of these highway lights on my parking lots and just use more lights in particular. So I'm doing that right now, just lighting up the parking near the central station and lighting up the highway. So that's basically it for this episode. We built a pretty nice office district, and we made some progress on the downtown transition. In the next episode we will most likely be doing something with the coastline, but I'm still not sure about that because I haven't recorded anything. And then I'll see you guys in the next one.